So welcome to the NAPI team meeting for the 10th of June, 2019. We had a little bit of a slow start as we worked to get the streaming going, but we're up now and we'll go through the regular agenda. Does anybody have any announcements or anything they would like to share?
No.
Not here.
Okay. So I'm going to open up the repo and the milestone as we go through. So now, okay, I have to get to the right one, of course. APIs. And just before I do that, I also want to, I will share that, but milestones, share. So that I don't forget, I want to flip back to the update that was sent in. So I'm just looking at my email, and Kevin sent me this update because he wasn't going to be able to make it today. Oops. Come on. Okay. Nope, it's not showing me the right thing. Sorry, I'm still finding the email from Kevin. There we go. Okay, so he just wanted to update us that he's created the PR for async worker and the optional callback. And he asked that we talk about the comment that he had regarding if there's no function provided, an APIM must be provided. He also responded to Gabriel's comment on regarding use cases for thread safe function with no function callback. And note out on API, the thread safe function PR code review is waiting on poll number 442. It says I've created the docs, but need to make some changes to the order prior to creating a PR on Node.on add-on API. So it sounds like he's making good progress on that. Maybe we should start with his questions so that we don't forget about them. The first one is the discussed comment, if no function is provided, an APIM must be provided. So if for anybody who's not up to speed, I guess it turns out that we were making one of the parameters optional, but it was through that parameter that we were getting the NAPI env when needed. So one of the suggestions was just to make it so you needed to pass the NAPI env as a parameter instead in those new signatures. And the question is if anybody has any concerns about that or.
No, it's absolutely needed, I think, because in the callback you need to be able to make an API calls. Otherwise, it's sort of emasculated, if you can't make an API calls in the callback.
Yep, and
so
I can't think of any downsides to requiring that when you create the object, you need to have an env.
Yeah. Although, let me just think. Like, you will get an env from an API though. So the wrapper for the callback should get an env. So you don't necessarily need to store the env, right? Because what would you use the stored env for?
Well, here, let me pull up the issue. It's 49. Pull request 489.
Well, okay, no, I do get it though. Like you can't even create the thread safe function without an env, right? So because what the semantics of a thread safe function are here's a NAPI value, which I know is function valued, right? And I give it to you, and you give me back another function which can be called from any thread. That's sort of the transaction with NAPI create thread safe function. Now, if I give you nothing, then it is still possible to call NAPI create thread safe function on the C side, right? But on the Node.on API side, you were never passing an env. You were passing in a function which until now was required, right? But the function contained an env, right? So you were passing in the env implicitly. Whereas now, if the function is optional, you're cutting out both the function and the env, and that's not good.
Right, and the other thing is we've always, within every object in Node.on API, we store the env so I wouldn't want us to make this like the only one that didn't, even if there wasn't some other good reason.
Well, the reason we don't pass the env and we store the env is because, yeah, we always associate in Node add-on API, we always associate the env with the value. So there's always nappy env, nappy value together,
Right.
and then wrapped into some class depending
Yeah.
on what the nappy value contains, right? And but in order to call the C-level API, you need the env explicitly, right?
Yes.
So if on the C++ side you pass nothing, you don't pass a nappy colon function, then you don't have an env at all,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and it
So if
won't work
that's optional, yeah. So I don't know if there's any other parameter that we pass to nappy create thread safe function which could have an env implicitly stored in it, because I think the function is the only like nappy value that we pass into the create.
But in this case, we're talking about new async worker signatures. So like you can see the code I'm sharing, like it's an example like right here. So it's we were the complaint was like for async worker that you had to pass in a function even though we never needed it, right? Potentially.
Oh, wait a minute. Are we talking about thread safe function or async worker?
Async worker.
Uh, my understanding is that we're making the function optional for thread safe function, not for async worker.
Well, this is different. This is 49, which is around actually adding new signatures which don't
Oh
require a
yeah,
function,
okay.
right? And it's in that
Right.
context that the question, the discussion was, hey, okay, we're removing the function parameter, so you don't need to, you now have new signatures where if you don't want to use a function, you don't have to
Okay,
pass
yeah.
one, because people were just passing dummy
Right.
ones, right?
Yeah. This is the exact same situation as with
Right.
thread safe function. That's why I was confused.
Yep.
Yeah. If you want to avoid passing the env explicitly, you need to be passing something into the constructor that is a subclass of nappy colon value, because nothing else
Right.
stores the env inside it. And I mean, I guess the point is that you don't want to pass anything that is derived from nappy colon value, because you may just want the callback to just do something purely native. And so then yes, you have to pass the env, because the constructor for the async worker or for the thread safe function has to in turn call the NAPI for creating the lower level object, and that requires an env. So there's no
Yeah.
way except to pass the env. But we need not pass it as a nappy underscore env. We can pass it as a nappy colon env, because it's pretty much the same thing.
I think they end up being the same thing, right?
Yeah, but I mean, for yeah, absolutely. But for consistency I mean, for I don't know, for I guess for aesthetic reasons, we should pass a nappy colon env, because we don't want to allude to the fact that you need the lower level data types in order to use the higher level bindings, or
Yeah, I
not
wanted
bindings,
to
higher
see
level API.
where, like, I'm trying to see if there's somewhere else that we're doing the same thing.
Where we're just passing the env.
Right. I think actually that's the way it's documented. But I think so there's the doc. So the doc.
Well, all the constructors for all the different values, there would have to be an env passed at some point. Like, like if you call object colon new.
Right. Right. But I'm looking in the code, colon env.
There it is.
Yeah, I see. Okay. So here's like property descriptor. It is a nappy colon env.
Yeah, actually, I added that because originally property descriptors didn't have the env parameter, but
Okay.
for good reasons you need to pass it. So that's how that ended up there.
Okay. So that needs to be a comment on this, is that it should be.
Yeah, nappy colon env. It doesn't make a big difference, but it may in the future.
It definitely looks better in terms of.
For sure.
So I'm just going to comment these should be. You can.
Maybe you may want to comment the line above, because this is actually the initialization of the constructor parameter rather than.
Okay, this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But otherwise, we agree that that's, yeah, adding that M just makes sense.
Yep.
Okay. Sounds good. Otherwise, I guess I think that's what he wanted to ask about specifically, because he had that question, but then we should also go in and review if we can.
Yep.
Okay, so moving on to his next question. The next one, respond to Gabriel's request for comments regarding use cases for thread-safe functions with no function callback. So do you have anything on that you want to share or talk about?
Yeah, basically, my impression is from this first issue in the milestone is that we're pretty much everything that's currently in experimental in NAPI has very, very good reasons to be stabilized or to be declared stable. Because everybody I pinged, there are 3 items. I forget the third one, but we have date and time. We have the thread safe function being optional. And then we have a third one. I forget which one that is. So
Is it
date.
big?
Yes, big int. Yes. So these 3 things.
Somebody comment about big int not working on some platforms, but I assume we have testing which must work across all of our supported platforms.
Yeah. I guess I'm not sure. Version 8 of Node, I believe, has big int, right? So like on the engine side. So if they all have big int, then we can go ahead. If not, then we need to think carefully. But
yeah,
basically,
I'm not sure that 8 does, but we can check that.
well, yeah, we can do a quick check.
Because yeah, that was going to be my next question. Are these all back portable if we wanted to?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let me just quickly download it, because I've had a million versions of Node, but then I reinstalled everything.
Right.
So Node minus version is 8.16. So Node and then const x equals 5n semicolon. Syntax error, invalid or unexpected token. This is a problem.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong. If a sequence of numerical digits ends in an n, then that means big int,
Yep.
right? Okay, so yeah, 8 doesn't have big int.
Right.
It's a bit of a problem.
So that would be, I mean, it doesn't mean we can't put them all into 5 and non-experimental. It just means that 5 can never be backported.
That's right.
That's right. And so that's where I think we should figure out, like, is it because the optional argument could clearly be backported, right?
Yeah. That doesn't require buy-in from anything except Node.
And then the others, what were the 3 again? Can you remind?
So date time, that's a no-brainer, because I mean that's just basic JavaScript. So
Okay.
so that's not a problem. The thread safe function optional is also not a problem.
Yep.
The only one that's not backportable is big int.
Right. So the question would be, does it make sense to wait on that one and do a 5 with just the other 2? Or is there some to get it?
Well, if we include big int in 5, then we cannot claim that 5 is available on all LTS versions of Node.
No, but that's
right?
always going to be the case. Like, I don't think we're not always going to be able to backport. I mean, that's not impossible. I mean, I don't think we can always ensure that, a new version of an API is going to be backportable to all LTS versions.
Right.
It may be still something to try and do if we can, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, as a policy, it would be good to sort of support all LTS versions,
right?
If at all possible, with a new release. So, I mean, I cannot predict what new proposals we will have for APIs. But I mean, if we split this into 2 releases and then had 6 contain solely big int and available on 10 and 12, that would be an option. And then we would say that 5 is available on all LTS, 6 is available on 10 and 12. We could go that way. Or we could leave it experimental, though it does sound like there is serious usage of it. So it, in terms of our criterion whereby, real world usage has to be evident, I believe it meets that criterion.
Right.
So.
Okay. And it's in Big Int is in 10, is it?
I believe so. NVM install 10. You guys are having me bootstrap my system again
Because
here.
I mean, that's just the end of the year, right?
Yeah. Let's see. So node context. Yeah, that's fine. 10's fine.
It just would mean until the end of the year, like if we did a 6, that would basically mean then we can't backport anything else that actually requires a version bump, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah. So we would be bucketing everything that shows up potentially in an API by the end of the year into experimental.
Well, we could still make a 7 and an 8 in master and 10 or something. It just couldn't be something that would go all the way back.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. I guess you're right. If we do stabilize Big Int as 6 or even as 5, it doesn't matter. At that point, we are sort of forcing ourselves to wait until 8 goes out of scope and is no longer supported before we can ever again claim that something is supported on all LTS versions.
Yeah.
So yeah. But I mean, okay, let's not forget we do have 4, which is supported across all LTS, and it is fairly comprehensive.
Yep.
And there is, I mean, I guess the folks who are using Big Int in the real world do not expect to use Big Int on 8 because they know that the engine doesn't support it. So So it's not going to come as a surprise that we don't backport it.
There is the other issue where we were talking about there's actually 2 definitions of NAPI version, the one in Node version and the one in JS something API.
Yeah, JS native API.
We can leave the default as 4, even though later versions support 5 or 6.
Okay, that's a bit confusing to me. Like, do we actually define NAPI version twice?
If you look at the issue, that unfortunately for naming reasons, it turns out to be yes. One ends up being used internally as the version that the version of Node you're running with supports. So for example, we put a 5 out. If we don't change it in the other one, it's the default that you get unless you override it. Right? Like you can set NAPI version to experimental to get experimental versions. Similarly, if say the default was 4, you could actually set it to 5 to get what's in 5. But it means that you have to sort of explicitly choose to move up as opposed to, and where that's interesting is that lets you say, well, we're going to leave it at 4 because that's going to work across all the LTS versions. And if you want to use it, well, you're going to have to actually opt into it by selecting 5, but then that you opted in, and therefore it's not necessarily the preferred one, right?
Well, but currently we have only 2 levels, right? We have experimental and released, right? So if you want to use something that is not a released version, you would define your NAPI version as experimental, or you would define NAPI experimental, and then you'd get everything outside the release.
Well, today, because those 2 numbers are set the same, we've backported 4 everywhere, and the default is 4. So if you don't do anything, you just get 4, which is the default, or you set experimental to get the experimental stuff. If we made a 5 and a 6, but left the default as 4, it would mean that by default you would get 4 and only be able to use the functions in 4.
Right.
However, then you could opt in by defining your NAPI version as 5 or 6.
In addition to being able to define NAPI experimental.
Yeah, and you could do experimental, which will get you everything.
Yeah.
But your other options would be 5 or 6 to get specific things that come in those versions.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'd be tempted to say, like, if we weren't going to be able to backport it, we might want to leave the default as the lower number, right?
Yeah. I don't know. It's just a vague sensation, but I'm thinking like, if we, at what point are we actually causing people to have to make code changes so as to be ABI stable? Because at that point it just defeats the purpose, right? Like if people say, yeah, if they build their code with number defined NAPI version 5, then yeah, it should still be ABI stable, because as Node.js moves forward, eventually,
Yeah, they can go
yeah,
to 5, but if they use any of the new functions in 5.
well, and which they will, because otherwise they wouldn't have said go to 5, right?
Right. Right. In which case
Yeah,
they won't be able to go back to the previous, they're stable, but not for version 8.
that's right. Yeah, and eventually their add-on, without any sort of recompiling or anything, will all of a sudden be supported on all LTS versions, because 8 will just drop off the radar.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's okay. I guess that's reasonable.
I guess like, so in our mind, is it like, it's probably worth doing a 5 and a 6 so that we can backport them separate. We can do some backporting if we want to.
Yeah.
I'm not sure
Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
need to rush to backport those things, but having the possibility probably isn't a bad idea.
Yeah. I mean, as a rule, I think if and when we release a new NAPI version, we should strive very strongly to having it available on all
Right, because we
LTS
might get
versions,
some
right?
pushback on 8, but anyway, I think if we do it in master so that we have the option, that's the best way to start, and then we can see
Well, one thing's for sure, right? Like, if we decide to handle big int separately because of this backporting
Yep.
issue, then it's going to take a while for us to backport everything else anyway, right? So by the time we have woven version 5 through all the LTS versions,
Yep.
we may get some feedback on that, and then we
Yep.
can handle that in at the time at which we choose to release big int. So I think it might be worth just getting the process started for date and thread safe function,
Right.
and
Okay.
see where it leads us, right?
Just do 5, and then once that's, unless there's some big rush, that makes sense to me.
Exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
Okay.
All right, cool. So, okay, so then, yeah, I guess I can get the backporting sort of steamroller going.
Okay. So that's, yeah. So I think we've discussed what Kevin wanted us to cover, other than there is a pull request 442, which he probably would
Yes.
also like some.
Yeah, I'm actually in the process of reviewing that one.
Okay.
The thread safe function. I think
That's quite a big one, and I think you're probably the best to review that. So
yeah, I think it's pretty good. Like, there's not much left to do on there. So I'm just gonna give it a final once over, but I think it's gonna be good to go.
yeah, maybe if you can let me know once you're happy with it, I'll take a look. But
Okay.
you're probably gonna have the most feedback. So
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's gone through a few rounds of review, and now it's, so far at least, it's mostly just like, like maybe we should rename this function kind of thing.
right. Okay.
But there might be something towards the bottom there. I haven't gotten to the bottom yet. So that's where that is.
Okay. Okay. So I think we've covered what Kevin asked me to update on. Let's look at the things that are tagged. So I think we already talked about what should go into NAPI version 5.
Yep.
Submissions to Node+JS Interactive. So Jim, I know you posted the birds of the feather abstract.
Right. So when the way Node plus JS Interactive works, the way their submissions work is you give a primary speaker and a secondary speaker. The primary speaker, if the session is accepted, they get a full conference pass. The secondary speaker gets a partial reimbursement for that. So what I was hoping we could discuss as a group is who I should put as primary and who I should put as secondary.
For the birds of a feather, or I guess
for the birds of a feather and for the workshop.
Okay. So the workshop's the same thing. So you get 1.5. What was it? What was the second person gets?
The first person gets a full ride, and then the secondary person gets a partial.
Okay. So we should make those different.
We could.
And I'm hoping to be covered some other way, so I wouldn't put me.
Right. So I'm thinking either Nicola or Gabriel ought to be the first speaker, and if
yeah, I'm probably a bad person to be the first speaker because I'm very unlikely to go. I'm still hoping, but it depends on a myriad logistical things that have to happen here.
Okay.
So let's not waste a potential free ride for somebody. So I don't know. Maybe you two should be, you and Nicola, that is, should be primary and secondary, and vice versa on the other one.
So the fact that you were accepted as a speaker would not be influential in your ability to come.
Yeah. I mean, the logistics are personal here, so it's like settling in type logistics. So so that's the thing. I'm hoping to get everything ironed out and then put in a travel request, which hopefully Intel will approve. But I'm not 100% sure, which is why I'd rather not. I'd rather not take up like a valuable, free ride type spot.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think if you two are the...
So Nicola, would you prefer to be the primary speaker for the workshop or for the Birds of a Feather?
Unmute.
It's your choice.
Okay.
It's okay. For me, it's the same.
Okay. I'll figure it out, and I'll get both of those submissions in today, so that we're not waiting to the very last minute.
Excellent.
And I'm assuming they'll give us one or the other. That is what I'm assuming.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, a Birds of a Feather is a pretty light thing, right? So
yeah,
depends what kind of submissions they get and all that. So
okay, all right.
Okay, that sounds good.
I have one small thing regarding workshops. I'm kind of trying to test the waters here in Santa Clara to see if anybody is interested in doing like a native add-on workshop. So I'm trying to see how I can do things at Intel, like to reserve rooms and maybe float the idea on Twitter, see if anybody wants to come down for a workshop. So I'm very, very, very wet behind the ears at organizing such things, and so just wanted to let you know. And I'll probably at some point when I have all the Intel logistics lined up, I'll just a tweet about it and say, if anybody's interested, and I'll have a time and a place by then, hopefully, and maybe try to get like maybe 10, 15 people. That kind of thing. So just so you know, and I'll probably be using your material, Jim, if you don't mind.
And I would probably come down, Gabriel.
Oh, you would? Oh, yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah. If you can make it down, absolutely. I'll try to give you as much heads up as possible.
Okay, great.
Yeah, sweet.
It would definitely be good to have a few workshops like that. I've been trying to think of where else we can do them, so that's good.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if it'll fly, but if it does, then so will you, Jim, right? Or at least
right. Yes. Or drive.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I think, and that's this one, we've covered off this workshop as well, right?
Yes. Yep.
And I guess, so just as a reminder, I know that there were a couple of other ones in terms of people. Nick, you had another submission, and I think Gabriel, you had one too. But so just a reminder, today's the end of Friday. I think Friday's the last day to submit this week.
Right.
Okay. So do we need some additional async worker variants? I think we talked about that. I'm not sure there's anything new to talk about that.
Yeah, I think it's basically, we concluded that it's a good idea, and yeah, some of them might actually be based on thread safe function rather than async worker, because I'm not sure how we can do like async progress worker, for example.
Right.
I don't know if we have in NAPI. I don't know if we have support for progress. So.
Yeah, and it would be good to do it with existing APIs as opposed to adding APIs, right? Because the main
absolutely,
reason, reason we'd be adding them is to support like migration as opposed to anything else, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So now that I think about it some more, so if we did nappy thread safe, if we implemented them using nappy thread safe function, we'd actually be getting into like thread implementation territory because
Right.
thread safe function doesn't
Yep.
start any threads on its own, right? So
Yep.
yeah, we'll have to look at it in more detail. Like I'd also have to look at the way Nan does the progress
Right.
async worker, because if it does have support from Node itself for it,
Then it might
then
make
we
sense,
may
yeah.
want to consider adding more async
Yep.
worker APIs in the C layer
Agreed.
to expose that functionality.
The other thing that came to mind is, like, if we're building something with thread safe function, we may actually want to make this like a module, like a NAN migration module or something. I don't know. As opposed to making part of the API itself, right?
Because it would have like actual code in it, like
yeah, exactly. So I think
right.
that would be worth thinking about too when we get along the way. Does this, yes, it makes sense to help people migrate, but maybe not actually part of the core module.
Yeah, because that's a fairly big commitment.
But if we ended up adding stuff to core NAPI, then it would make more sense to potentially be part of it. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So nothing more to talk. We just need cycles to work on it. Focus on async worker. So this is actually Kevin was working on that. So we talked a bit about, I think, the stuff that was going on there in terms of where did we have the, well, actually this is the one specifically, I guess, but yeah, so Kevin's been pushing forward on some of those, and that's one where we were adding some new async worker signatures. Anything else to talk about on that one?
Just that the one with the destroy is pretty much ready to go. I'm just waiting for another review or for the 7 days to go up, and then I'll start CIing it. And
which number is that? That's
oh boy, let me.
Yeah, there's only 11 of them. I should be able to find it.
Yeah, it's 488.
Okay, I was wondering if I'd reviewed it or not. So, yeah.
Yeah, so for this, the only thing, as I said in the comments, is that I don't think we can do the ref counting because then we have to expose the ability to unref into like as an API, which as far as I know is not something that Nan has. So we already have an additional functionality beside Nan, which is to suppress destruct.
Right.
So
yeah, this looks pretty straightforward. So.
Yeah. It's but you do realize that if we were to assert in the destructor that if this were implemented using a reference count instead of the suppress destruct flag, then in the destructor we would sometimes run into a situation where the reference count were greater than 0, or in this case the suppress destruct flag were set to true, because if you say suppress destruct, you're still going to end up calling the destructor. It's going to be flagged at that point,
right?
So there's no point. I don't think there's any point in asserting that it's 0 unless we also provide like a unsuppressed destruct, which is a special case of unref, basically.
Right. Yeah.
So
I don't think you're right, because you can call destroy whenever, right? So
exactly, that's right. Yeah. So the only reason we need this is so that the mechanism of destruction is available for overriding. That's
right.
it.
Yeah.
And so this covers that, and this should bring us up to par with NAT.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. I think that's an SQLite port.
Yeah, so Nicola and Gabriel, you may recall earlier helping me diagnose a problem with running LLDB under VS Code. My breakpoints were not triggering.
Yep.
And so Michael and I met last week, and the takeaways from that are we were able to determine the issue is in the LLDB plugin for VS Code. And it has an adapter model. And when I change the adapter from classic to native, it works perfectly. So that was one takeaway. The other takeaway is Michael was able to confirm with the Mocha maintainer that it fires off only one process, even though it has a bunch of stuff going on. Unless you take extraordinary measures, a Mocha runs in a single process.
Okay.
So that's what we learned last week, and so now I'm resuming work on that to get that PR in.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Great. Yeah, okay. I understand why you would want to know about the one process thing.
Yeah.
Because then,
Yep.
of course, your breakpoints aren't triggering, right? If
Yeah.
it's in a different process. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah. It's working beautifully now.
excellent.
So I think that's pretty much the end of the list, and we're out of time. So unless there's something that somebody wants to bring up, I'd say we should call that until next week.
All right.
Sounds good.
Okay. Talk to everybody later.
Okay.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.